Let's do a lesson on comping, and specifically let's do a lesson on comping behind a super advanced soloist like Michael Brecker or Randy Brecker. Because even on the funk book that we were playing with the Brecker Brothers, the comping had to be a little bit different than what I would do if it was on more of an R&B type of artist. And the reason I found out that the comping had to be a little bit different was because Mike was waving me off halfway through his solos on the first tour we did. And of course, I didn't like that. I was doing something wrong. And Mike is a super sweet person, but when he's out there and the heat is on, he needs to hear what he needs to hear. And I kind of knew already, but I wasn't putting it together. Before we get too much farther, please subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notifications when this important information comes out. Let's get right to it. The basic idea is that when you're comping for a soloist like Michael Brecker, he doesn't want to hear tertiary harmony. If we're playing on an F minor chord, he really doesn't want to hear your, lovely F minor 9 chord with you kind of spelling out not only the chord itself in very overt terms, but also what extensions are on it. Because at any given time, Mike might be out here. And if you're doing this, and Mike is doing this, that's what he's hearing, and his ears are so fast, and Randy too, excellent outside player. When these guys are playing, they need to hear something that's way broader and more open. And Mike did several tours with McCoy Tyner's trios just for the sheer joy of playing with McCoy Tyner. And McCoy Tyner, of course, added so much ingenious vocabulary to what we play. But McCoy's basic comping idea that he came up with behind John Coltrane was fourths voicings, this series of things here, which to start with are just far more open. There's going to be a sheet of those basic voicings for free on my Patreon page. There's a link down below. And that was already kind of genius because it left John Coltrane much freer to it didn't box him into these notes, which are all the notes in the key, really. And they sound great on an R&B tune. And, I played a lot of stuff like that often with David Sanborn, whom a lot of people don't realize unless you saw him live was also an excellent outside player. But Mike wanted to hear these. And the genius of McCoy was that when Train went outside, for example, McCoy could go out kind of with him by altering the bottom 4 notes of the 5-note voicing chromatically either up or down. And I think he had it more sophisticated than this, but basically the idea is that if Train's not here, I'm playing an F minor here, he's somewhere out here, And you can kind of play this big broad harmonic palette that prompts him to go different places but doesn't box him in because you aren't chaining him to your minor 9 chord. Ingenious, and in McCoy's hands it was just these power chords. I'm going to do a whole lesson on just those voicings. But for now, I want to get to what we did when we were with the Brecker Brothers and we were playing a funk groove. And at first I started out playing some kind of groovy comping with, my R&B chord voicings vocabulary. And that probably sounded something like this. which doesn't sound bad, but it's the tertiary harmony that Mike didn't want to hear, and boy, he sure didn't want to hear my upper structure triads and me playing stuff that might conflict with wherever he wanted to go. He'd rather have you lay out and play trio with drums and bass. And I should add here that on these gigs, we had Mike Stern, who comps like this anyway. I think he got it from the same place I did, which was kind of the Boston school. Mike plays with this big, wide open sound, and it was always super easy for the two of us to make a really great, super clean, open orchestration, no matter how busy and funky the tune was. We used to play some skunk funk at these ridiculous tempos. So I did the first tour with Mike kind of waving me off, and I asked him a couple of times, like, you know, what's the deal there? Am I playing too busy or something? And he couldn't put his finger on it. And finally it kind of occurred to me, because I already, when I played jazz gigs, with people like Mike or with, you know, other sophisticated soloists, I would play the McCoy Voicings to open the harmonic field up for them. So I started doing that on the next tour we did, and it was like this light bulb went off in my head. And when we're comping on a Rhodes or an organ or a clavinet, piano is a big glassy open sounding instrument like this, and you know the soundboard cancels out some harmonics that aren't coherent and stuff like that. A Rhodes is a super dense instrument. So typically when I'm comping on that, I'm not playing a whole lot of 5-note voicings. I'm kind of doing more of a 3-note thing, and I'm bouncing it off my left hand. You'll notice there's a fair amount of left hand activity in here. But let me just play that for you, and then I'm going to isolate the comping track a little bit. And what I'm doing, 3-note voicings, but again, you know, I'm kind of imagining, I wouldn't play this busy if there was a soloist probably, because, you know, it's going to depend on what he or she is doing. But 3-note voicings also with the chromatic alterations when the soloist is going out, or just to create that open feeling that makes them feel like they can go out without clashing with me playing that. So let's have a listen to what that sounds like. okay, that's a different sound, and it's more open sounding. It's not as lush as the tertiary harmony is, although you can also play beautiful ballads just with fourths. You know, I have an arrangement of that. That's blue and green done kind of with fourths voicings all the way through. But it's just more open. You can play the same kinds of rhythms that you would play with your tertiary voicings, tertiary meaning voicings based in thirds rather than voicings based in fourths. I often kind of condense the fourths and get this little more clustery thing. You'll notice that I'm also pretty low in the register. I like to get things to cook lower in the register. I'm not all up in here, especially when I'm comping. At a peak, you know, and if I can nail a note that the soloist is nailing, I'll come up here and, you know, and be up in there, but I like cooking more than, you know, too busy. And I play a lot of short notes, which made me a really great, you know, match for Mike Stern, who's often playing more quarterly, and he plays beautifully with the fourths and so forth. Sometimes Mike gets into kind of a chicken picking thing. Dean Brown was excellent at that too. And that opens it up for me to define a little bit more of the harmony with these kinds of voicings. So I'm going to post a PDF, I'll try to clean it up, of the comping I did with the fourths, and you can kind of see just, you know, that it provides also like a lot of ways to throw some variety into what you're doing, because there's limitless possibilities between the rhythms and the voicings to create sort of a unique path through this stuff. I like to play this stuff behind Bill Evans too. I'm going out to Europe with Bill in 2 weeks. Great to play with Randy. We still do gigs as the Brecker Brothers reunion band. His wife Ada is another very sophisticated soloist who, you know, I don't even know if they can put their finger on it, but they like it like this. So that's the lesson on this. I'm going to do another one on more kind of R&B voicings, the kind of thing that I used to use with the great David Sanborn. And these are things that you hear Chester Thompson using all the time, Billy Preston using, Herbie Hancock using these things. And they're kind of what I call gospel triads, but specific voicings that keep you from sounding too corny, and yet they give you a lot of vocabulary to use when you're comping. So that's the deal. Check below for PDF of the comping, and also maybe I'll put this F7 funky track on there. These will both be links on my free links on my Patreon page, so you can download this stuff and have some fun with it yourself. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and ring the bell, I guess is what I'm supposed to say. And I'll see you for the next lesson.